Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to SportsBeat Live. This is where we talk Chiefs and we talk it with folks in the media who know them best. Today, that's Vahe Gregorian and Sam McDowell. We're here at Arrowhead Stadium. Hey, thanks for joining us at a different time. We usually come to you on Thursdays at 10 a.m. We decided to push it back until a little after 1 o'clock today because of interviews here at Arrowhead Stadium as the Chiefs prepare for the AFC Championship game on Sunday against the Cincinnati Bengals. Earlier, just an hour or so, we heard from Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, the coordinators, Dave Toub, Steve Spagnuolo, and Eric Bieniemy, plus Jerick McKinnon and L'Jarius Sneed. We'll talk about what we heard, and we'll talk about it with you. Send us questions and comments and talk AFC Championship game with us. Okay, guys, second day in a row, we heard from Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. I think maybe the best way to characterize it is after the first day, we all felt there would not be any doubt that Patrick Mahomes was going to play in the game. And so he goes through a practice on Wednesday after we spoke for a podcast yesterday, and he goes through a practice. And so we get that update today, right? Patrick Mahomes goes through a workout on Wednesday, and once again, it's not an unequivocal, everything's fine. It's 100%. You're not going to hear that from Patrick Mahomes, but I think as I wrote, the bounce back continues, and he kind of took another bounce forward again today. Sam, is that a fair characterization? Just he says he's improving every day, and we're just going to have to wait and see on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I think that last part is the key, Blair, because there's some things that he even acknowledged, and it was actually to one of Vahe's questions, that he can't really test in the practice-like setting. I mean, it's not at full speed. It's not like you're scrambling away from a pass rush very frequently during a practice session. So those are the types of things I think he's going to be most inhibited. And those are the types of things we probably aren't going to know. And he actually probably isn't going to know until he gets in a game setting on Sunday. So everything you said, though, remains accurate. That, I think the most telling thing he said today was he feels better than he expected today. He felt better going through that practice yesterday than he anticipated. And I think a lot of his anticipation is just based on the nature of this injury, which is that this is usually a multi-week injury that he's trying to just play in 8 days.
It was interesting, Blair, too, just to follow up, kind of amplify that point with Sam. I mean, Patrick himself said, I guess I'll see on Sunday. I mean, he certainly doesn't seem to be giving any ground on whether he's going to be ready and things of that nature. But I think he also is being realistic that you can't really know the parameters of this until it's tested in that setting. So it's funny kind of thinking about this as we go now, because I see some people saying, well, Mahomes will be just fine. Well, he's really not going to be, depending on the context of how you think of that. I don't think anybody should be suggesting that, he'll be unbothered, right? I mean, he could be okay and he could make it work just fine, but he's not going to be playing at full capacity. And whatever he does will be despite this, not to be forgotten, I guess is sort of what I'd like to make the point of saying.
Yeah, it happened late in the second quarter of the Jaguars divisional round game, and of course he finishes the drive in which it happens, right? Because that ended in the field goal, the Butker 50-yard field goal. Then he misses the next drive, which is the 98-yard touchdown drive led by Chad Henne. And then the Chiefs get it back for one final snap, a kneel down before halftime, and that was Henne as well. Mahomes comes out and plays the entire second half against the Jaguars and, plays effectively, but in a limited way, right? I mean, Mahomes likes to work outside the pocket. I don't remember a play in which he went outside the pocket against the Jaguars. He did have a scramble. He did, run for a first down on a third, and I can't remember the distance. Wasn't far, but he got first down on it. And but it's like we didn't see him get to test his mobility And that is the concern for Sunday, right? It's Mahomes' mobility and all the damage he can do with that. And when you think about the crazy touchdown passes that he's thrown this year, and some of his best red zone operations have been with his because of his mobility. So that's what I think about when I consider what we might end up seeing on Sunday. That if his mobility is limited, that in many ways limits the Chiefs' offense. Am I right?
I'd urge any of our audience that hasn't seen it already to be sure and check out Sam's piece from yesterday that really explores in depth what Patrick's up against through the informed eyes of medical trainers and doctors. And, they have not treated Patrick, but they understand the ramifications of this injury. And Blair, everything you just said is how it's going to be up in the air until then. And Sam really lays it out well. I just wanted to plug that.
Thanks, Vi. It is one of his great separators, right? I mean, it's what makes him different than some of the even elite quarterbacks in the game is that he can turn something or nothing into something. And that's the piece of it. I'm not sure not only whether about his ability to do it, but whether or not the Chiefs are even going to ask him to do much of it on Sunday. I think it's pretty obvious that Andy Reid is going to have to alter the playbook a little bit, whether that means more quick passes, stuff that prevents a pass rush from affecting his game or not. I don't know, but that's kind of my prediction for what we're going to see Sunday is a lot more of the quick hitting stuff.
What's also used that term great separator, Sam, and it made me think of the other thing that is the drama and the variable of Sunday. He's really distinguished himself as a guy who's been able to rebound from injuries, play fairly well from injuries that, either right in the moment or through information we learned later might well have been incapacitating. And that's part of this formula. We don't exactly know how it fits until we see it on display, but no doubt that's part of it.
What do you do if you're the Bengals? How do you change things up? What do you bring more pressure? They've affected the Chiefs' offense with pass rush. They've got some guys, they got some dudes. So what are you doing if you're the Bengals?
Yeah, they've affected them with pass rush despite not bringing extra numbers. If I'm the Bengals, I don't alter that, but because if the Chiefs are going to be getting rid of the ball quickly, it's kind of irrelevant if you bring 5 or 6 guys. You're just opening up the back end of the defense, which, if you're throwing quick passes, the idea is to get the yardage after the catch, right? So I would not take guys out of my secondary to put them in the backfield if I'm the Bengals. I think, if anything, you could potentially see the safeties work a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. Perhaps you see some more bump and run stuff. The Bengals have always played Travis Kelce very physically, and I think as much as they're emphasizing today or this week throughout practice, I guarantee you their number one emphasis is you can't let Travis Kelce get a free release off the line of scrimmage on Sunday.
Yeah, look, that's largely how he ended up with 14 receptions against the Jaguars last week, a career high, and had a big impact on the game, no matter who was playing quarterback, right? Mahomes or Chad Henne. Can you guys think of any time during the last 5 seasons with Mahomes as a starter that the Chiefs won a game without, with Mahomes not doing Mahomesian things? Just I'm having a little trouble coming up with one. Maybe I'm just missing.
Well, we had the game in Buffalo where the Bills forced them to run the ball a lot, so they did. So I think that was one. He did have a couple of scramble plays still in that game. But you're right, Blair. I mean, this is the reason for the number 1 ranked offense in the NFL is because of what that guy does. And a lot of what that guy does is off script and off platform. And I think we're going to see him stick to the script a lot more than we probably ever have because the ankle's going to force him to play that way. And Steve Spagnuolo said something interesting today that I guess it actually probably was not that interesting, but I thought it was the most true statement we heard today, which is he said, we're going to have to play our best game of the year. And that's how I feel this game is going to turn, is if the Chiefs defense plays well enough to where the offense can get by without having its best guy.
I really like that Buffalo example. That was the game they played up there in front of no fans, right? It was the pandemic year. And Mahomes had good moments. I remember he clinched the game on a long third down pass. I want to say it was to Byron Pringle. That was a little bit, kind of surprising. It was Pringle on the receiving end of that. But you're right. That was statistically wasn't outstanding. The Chiefs ran the ball. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a good game. Chiefs ran the ball well, and that might be just serve as a pretty good example to how the Chiefs can win a game against a tough opponent without Mahomes racking up the big numbers.
What's
I think
really
we've forgotten that.
Go ahead, Sam.
Well, I was just going to say real quick, just to what Blair just said, I think we've forgotten that the Chiefs did run the ball so well against Cincinnati a year ago in this same setting. It was just that they refused to do it more frequently. And so, I think the Bengals might be more prepared for something like that because they might adjust to knowing that Patrick Mahomes can't fully do everything he's going to want to do on Sunday. But if they don't, that was an option last year, and this year they're going to have to take it if it's an option.
What's interesting about that is, you're right. The Bengals have to prepare more for that likelihood, or at least scenario. But in a certain peculiar way, it may also force the Chiefs to do something that will work better for them. And I just think it's such a great cat and mouse to this whole thing. And obviously each side will be adjusting, but I do think there's a real possibility that this plays to the Chiefs' different sort of strength.
And you think about the things that haven't gone right for the Chiefs in the games against the Bengals. You hear all the coaches, and we heard it again today, saying we got to cut down on mistakes, can't make mistakes. Well, there was the one game that had the big turnover, right? It was the last one, the previous game. I think they were losses all by a field goal, of course. I think they happened for different reasons. I thought one of the good points that was made today that we heard had to do with concentration, and I think it was Spagnuolo talking about it when it comes to the defense. I think that applies to everybody on this Chiefs team. There's no against this Bengals team, and in the situation the Chiefs are in with Mahomes possibly limited, that you can't give anything away. The Bengals are too good, as we saw last week in the win over Buffalo in Buffalo. And as they've done to the Chiefs 3 times in the past 2 seasons, you can't give them an inch. They will take full advantage of it, and they're that good, and proven it time again. I'm wondering if there's anything that you guys heard today or in the last 2 days that stuck with you from either a coach or a player when it just comes to, if nothing else, a key to victory.
Well, I think it's been purposely dry at the podium these past couple of days. It's not lost on these guys that the Bengals have taken the opposite approach this week, and it's been very evident that, likely from Andy Reid, but whomever it's come from, the message has been, we're not giving those guys the same thing they're giving us this week. So I really haven't heard anything of that nature. But Blair, I'd add on to your last point that, as far as not giving an inch, that stuff has to apply to the coaching staff as well. Because if you look back at these last 3 losses, particularly the last 2, the coaching played a role in those 2 losses. Mm-hmm. Now, the way it played a loss in Cincinnati was not leaving Patrick Mahomes on the field. And that might not be the same calculus because of his injury he's going through. But play calling was, I thought Andy Reid had perhaps his worst game as a Chiefs play caller. That AFC Championship game here last year. So I think there's a lot of players that, whether they want to admit it or not, are really excited that this is the opponent they're getting in this game. But I think the coaches should be too.
Just to add to Sam's point, when we think about mistakes, I mean, turnovers are the things we think about first, but absolutely game management / clock management. And some of that was on, I haven't reviewed it recently enough, but some of that was obviously on Patrick too, but they really blew those scenarios at the end of each of the halves last season. They just blew them. And that was one way or another mismanagement of the scene, and they win that game if they handle either of those right. I mean, that's I believe that's 100% true, and that's kind of what's interesting about this. Take nothing away from the Bengals; they were really good, and they might just be a better team. But you can point to in each of those games specific strategic points as well as key mistakes that really are self-inflicted by the Chiefs.
And something that you just don't expect. Look, having all the talent that the Chiefs have, maybe occasionally glosses over a mistake or compensates for a mistake. But I think back to the AFC title game last year and the way the first half ended, and how it just blew, like a cigar in the face, right? Just totally blew up on the Chiefs. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, I wasn't here. I didn't cover the game, just watching from TV. The end of regulation when the Chiefs got inside didn't they get to the 5 and have some play calling errors then, and that's when they ended up having to kick the field goal to send it to overtime instead of being presented this, after everything in the second half was a disaster for the Chiefs, having this grand opportunity to make up for all of that and play called their way into a not so chip shot field goal to send it into overtime. And then of course Mahomes had the pick in overtime that led to the game winning points by the Bengals.
It's really a reflection of the little things mattering. I mean, the cliches mattering. I mean, I would think that it would not even surprise me if a coaching staff stood up in front of the team and tried to emphasize that point and said, hey, look, we didn't get the little things right. And any of these 3 times we played the Bengals, though, the first game, which we kind of forget because they've subsequently lost to this team twice, was them not letting the Bengals score at the end of regulation to try and give Patrick Mahomes the ball one more time. They have sort of jacked up the way that they've played this team in the fourth quarter 3 consecutive times. And Blair, you had that great stat. Was it 31-3 that the Bengals have outscored them in these last 3 fourth quarters?
Yeah, well, if you got to add like 14 seconds of the third quarter for one of those, but yeah, and if you throw in overtime, it's 34-3. So that absolutely shouldn't happen to an Andy Reid coached Patrick Mahomes quarterback team.
Well, one other thing with that too, to just add to the tone setting first game, as Sam just reminded us of, there was a 3rd and 27 in that game that got the Chiefs beat. I mean, that the Bengals converted on 3rd and 27. The Chiefs also had I think it was right.
Also a coaching error, Vahe. I mean, that fits into this thing too.
Yeah, that's right. And I believe it was right before half, Byron Pringle returned a kickoff for a touchdown. Maybe it was a punt. I can't remember for sure, but it was called back for a holding penalty. And I seem to recall the penalty was not at the point of being relevant to the play. I might be remembering that wrong though, but it's funny, that game in the way is the least pertinent of all these. The AFC Championship last year relates obviously because of the stakes and the rematch, and the most recent game relates. But I do think in some weird way that the tone for what's happened these last couple of games was a little set in that collapse from a 18-point or 14-point advantage in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Something that I was going to say something else happened in that, since the game, the last year's regular season game in Cincinnati, that was just mind-boggling. That I can't come up with it. I'll tell you. One thing's that something that I think about with this game are the potential for defensive pass interference. Listen, yeah, they're not rookies anymore. Technically, they are rookies. The Watson, Williams, Cook, guys in the back defensive backfield going up against Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Boyd and even the possession receiver and plus the tight end Hurst. I mean, Cincinnati. We spent a lot of time talking about how good the Jacksonville receiving core was. Nobody's better than Cincinnati. Nobody. I mean, they're fantastic, and I think that they will take advantage of the youth of the Chiefs secondary. I think that's going to be another important matchup for the Chiefs on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, Jamar Chase has a way of making a 10-year veteran look like a rookie.
Yeah.
So, what's interesting about the Bengals is they do it quite differently than the way the Chiefs operate. They don't run a lot of motion, but they will line up Jamar Chase in a lot of different spots. So, you know, we've seen L'Jarius Sneed, the Chiefs' best corner, shadow some guys this year, but been in situations where it's not only been that they've had a top guy, but there's a pretty significant fall off between wide receiver one and wide receiver two. The Bengals don't have that because you can argue T. Higgins is maybe a borderline wide receiver one himself, and then you've got Tyler Boyd in the slot. So I think you're still going to see L'Jarius Sneed and his versatile role more than the shadow cornerback role, which is going to leave Jamar Chase with some rookies on the outside, particularly Trent McDuffie. And, you know, that's one of the reasons I asked Spagnuolo today about blitzing is because teams don't blitz Joe Burrow. He's getting rid of the ball much quicker. You know, he's actually blitzed less frequently than Patrick Mahomes is this year. And we know how adverse teams are to blitzing Patrick Mahomes. Joe Burrow sees extra numbers even less. So Steve Spagnuolo is going to have a real decision to make because we know he likes to blitz. We know he likes to be creative with those blitzes. A lot of them are with defensive backs, and I just don't think this is a wide receiver group that you can afford to take away a defensive back just to try and add pressure, which means the game's going to have to come down to Chris Jones has to put pressure. The Bengals like to double team Chris Jones. If that's the case on every snap, then guys like Karlaftis and Frank Clark are going to have to win one-on-one.
And just to reiterate that point and remind our audience of the way the Chiefs have improved at the pass rush this year, going from 29th in the NFL last year to second this year, from 55 to 31 in the regular season, but still only getting one when they played the Bengals before, just the same as last year. That I don't think that'll cut it. No matter how much you can be effective in the pass rush without actually getting the sack, they need to take them down a few times. One other quick thing, Blair, you mentioned the prospect of pass interference penalties. I find myself very cognizant of the kind of simmering bad blood between these teams, and as much as the Chiefs are kind of seeming to hold everything in and hold everything back while the Bengals babble on and on this week with trash talk, I think that's going to be going back and forth a lot on the field. And I really do. I find it easy to picture somebody having a really bad moment for either team and getting a penalty that reflects that stuff. It's to me, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. I just wonder if it'll be at a key part of the game.
Paul says tons of pass interference or illegal contact penalties, and it was the same ref, Ron Torbert. So, yes, there is, L'Jarius Sneed today came to the podium and had a chance to talk about the Bengals, nothing but compliments, and it's kind of what we've heard all week from Chiefs players about the Bengals. So, John says it all comes down to the offense and defensive lines. Joe Thuney didn't play last game, and that made it hard for OBJ. So, yeah, look, I think for the Chiefs, the offensive line is critical. They got to run. They got to bleed clock. They got to keep Burrow off the field. They got to keep Mahomes protected. Chiefs did a pretty good job of that in the second half of the Jaguars game. I don't remember Mahomes going down, really getting hit. And that was addressed today too. So, hey, you know what, you guys? We're not going to have another chance to get together like this until after the game on Sunday. So it'll be into the evening, right? 6:30 start. We probably won't come to you until about midnight or a little bit, maybe around midnight because of if the Chiefs win, trophy ceremony on the field, that sort of thing. So let me ask you, you don't have to pick a winner, but how do you think this thing unfolds? It's been a crazy line, as our colleague Jesse Newell has written about. Go read that story. It was a really good job. Jesse talked to odds makers about why the line has shifted as much as it has. And what is it? What's the latest update? Are the Chiefs a slight favorite now, Sam? Do you know?
Yeah, the Chiefs have moved back in front, which I think the three of us in the press box had anticipated whenever it was listed that Patrick Mahomes was a full participant. I mean, listen, the Chiefs, I think, would be, in the 5 to 6 point range today if Patrick Mahomes was healthy. And I kind of had envisioned this game where the Chiefs won pretty handedly against the Bengals. And I know the Bengals looked great last week, but The Patrick Mahomes injury obviously changes that. I mean, it changes the line, but it all has to change your thinking on the way the game's going to go as well. I tend to think it's going to be a lower scoring game than we've seen when these two teams have matched up the last 3 times. So still on the fence about the winner. We'll see that in my prediction tomorrow, but I do think it's got the potential to be a little bit of a lower scoring game than what we're used to seeing with these guys.
I predict that Sam will once again use the term coin toss game, and as he should, because I think this is going to be on the line of something that razor thin. I suppose to me, it's hard to envision it not coming down to the last couple minutes. I think it'll be more like the exact sort of set of scores we've had, a little higher scoring than Sam thinks, probably again in that 27-24 range with one team about to score at the end. And do they get it? Stay tuned.
I'm Bengals. I was so impressed with their performance last week in Buffalo. And look, playing in the snow, you would think would be a big Bills advantage. I thought it would actually help the Bengals last week, playing on footing that was uncertain. But I just can't get it out of my head that how good the Bengals are. We always talk about motivation. I do think the Chiefs have some motivational advantages here. Lost 3 in a row to this team. They knocked them out of the playoffs last year, denied the trip to the Super Bowl. John likes the Chiefs by 2 scores. Okay, Chiefs fans would take that. But the Bengals also have motivation. They lost a heartbreaker in the Super Bowl. I think this season has been geared toward avenging that outcome. And my other prediction is no matter who wins on Sunday in Kansas City, that team will win the Super Bowl. I think these are the 2 best teams left in the NFL. So, all right. Hey, Vahe and Sam, we will talk to you guys on Sunday at Arrowhead after the game. And stay tuned. Tomorrow, we'll have a podcast that will involve the other 2 partners here, Herbie Teope and Jesse Newell. So for George Howard, for Sam, for Vahe, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you after the game.